I remember 2 years ago, actually, I was at the Smarter conference. I said that a more diversified Europe is emerging. So I showed a slide that we said that UK has 50% of the utility scale installation. That share has dropped quite a bit. At the moment now, they are at around 30%, as quite a bit of an investment has been done also in Germany and Italy at the moment.
It's a new year, and what better way to begin than look at a part of the energy transition that's likely to drive future development. Welcome to the Smarter podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Gifford. And while last episode before Christmas I reported to being a little bit sick, in the new year I've collided headfirst with the flu, so my apologies for sounding more than a little bit stuffed up. But it's an exciting thing on the pod today because I really do believe that there's growing consensus that batteries are ready to shake up energy markets in a big way. Battery energy storage systems, or BESS, look like that they've overcome price and bankability barriers and are ready for mass deployment. Delivering system stability, overcoming congestion, and reducing wholesale electricity price volatility, utility-scale BESS in particular almost seems like it can do it all. And that's precisely what we're exploring in this episode of the Smarter podcast with energy storage principal analyst Anna Darmani from Wood Mackenzie. Anna has more than a decade of experience in industry analysis, having worked at EIT InnoEnergy and in academia before that, researching renewable energy policy and investment. Anna joined Wood Mac in 2021. But first, this episode is powered by Hyperstrong, a leader in advanced energy storage solutions, with over 25 gigawatt hours deployed worldwide. With cutting-edge energy storage technology, Hyperstrong is empowering a sustainable future. Check out the website at hyperstrong.com. Hyperstrong, we make energy storage simple for you. In early December, analyst Wood Mac released its European utility-scale BESS outlook, finding that deployment almost doubled from 2024 to 2025. And it was a milestone year for energy storage, with cumulative capacity exceeding 100 gigawatts of all different energy storage technologies. Anna Darmani leads the EMEA energy storage team for Wood Mac, and she joins us today. Anna, welcome to the Smarter podcast.
Hi, thanks a lot. I'm very happy to be here.
Well, in terms of electricity market dynamics, what's the need? What's the big demand for utility scale energy storage in Europe?
So we know that the European government, they've been quite ambitious about the renewable targets and how much renewable they want to deploy in the market. We saw actually in 2025, the average of renewable capacity in the total installed generation capacity was 45%. In some markets, such as Germany and Denmark, this share was much higher than the others. In Denmark was 70%, in Germany was 65%. So the ambitions for renewables have been quite massive over the past years, and we have kept investing in solar and wind assets. But we all also know these assets, basically, they need energy storage to support their intermittency. So that has brought attention more and more to storage. And with more investment that we have done into renewables, there was a more clear need for basically energy storage. And that has been driving quite a bit of an investment in the utility scale energy storage assets over the past years. We are seeing that how the power price volatility is changing. We are seeing that how now with shutdown of some thermal assets, more batteries are becoming to the spotlight because they can do the services that previously was being done by some other assets. For example, now is the topic of using batteries for inertia or voltage control. So I would say, with more renewable in the system, battery have a role to play, and that we just realized over the past couple of years. So, and that's why we're seeing massive investment in the utility scale energy storage, and that is just the beginning of the story for this market.
And, you mentioned volatility. volatility extremely high, peaks of electricity price on the wholesale market, and then extremely low or even negative prices. This is really problematic for solar and wind, with capture rates falling. What kind of impact do you expect to see this energy storage that's coming onto the system? What impact will it have in terms of that electricity market volatility, and also that kind of cannibalization of solar prices, or the prices that solar systems can achieve?
So in last year, we saw with more renewable coming online, negative prices have been increasing year on year across European market. I think it was around between over 500 hours that we had negative prices across Europe. And that's because of having more solar and wind on the system. Actually, we can look at this slide now here that we see how the capture prices for solar assets have been dropping year by year. And that has been meaning that also meant that the power price volatility have been increasing and providing more opportunities for batteries. More power price volatility also means lack of flexibility, and that's a signal in the market that we need more basically assets to come online. So before we saw that the impact of more renewable in the system, we see that daytime pricing is going down because we have enough solar in the market. And then we see in some market actually thermal plant basically setting the prices during the time that there is not enough renewable available. And that has been causing quite a bit of a volatility and differences in the day and night prices in some markets, and the peak prices, etc. So there's been a shift, and with more battery coming to the system, the batteries are here to support basically. So it will basically, through the time, we are forecasting that the number of negative prices going down with more batteries coming online. But it also doesn't mean that the volatility will disappear. So negative prices for me also means curtailment. It also means that we are not using the assets when we should use it. But with more renewable in the market, we're going to keep having volatility in the market. It is because we have to shift our supply and demand through different time, and batteries are there to do the job. But based on our forecast, batteries are there to support. A number of negative prices going to drop with more battery system coming online. But there is still time to get there, and it takes a bit of investment in the utility scale storage for us to reach that point.
Well, and if there is volatility going to remain a feature of the market, that means there's an ongoing opportunity for batteries as well.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I think opportunities for batteries going to stay there. As I said, when you have renewable, you need flexible resources, including batteries, to balance that supply and demand. So I don't see the opportunities going down. I think it's going to shift a bit. It's from one market to another market, or its type, let's say. So as I said, new markets is also becoming available. Battery going to perform the services to the market that they are not doing at the moment. For example, inertia now is a big topic. We have seen NSOE also releasing this pre-policy draft and regulation that are looking into making grid forming inverter basically a compulsory part of solar and wind generation. And we know that after certain sizes, battery have a role to play. So it means more co-location. So in future, battery is going to perform more roles, but I'm very optimistic, even though the market shape will change through the time with having more flexible resources on the system. In the system, I do think batteries and energy storage gonna have a role still to play. If you have a power system that is driven by renewable sources, it also means that we need flexible resources, including batteries.
Well, let's talk about co-location in just a few moments. But before that, while we're still looking at the kind of demand side of the equation, one of the big stories in 2025, and I guess we expect that to continue throughout this year, is the growth of demand from data centers. In the US, there's been a lot of discussion about that. How do you see that playing out in terms of energy storage here in Europe?
So in Europe, the data center development is slightly behind the US still. So there's a gap here. in our database, we have over 600 data center sites in Europe. Only 5 of them are disclosed with battery. So it could be more sites that they have a battery. It is just not has been disclosed, but based on our database, 5 of those 600 sites, they have batteries. So it's at the moment, on average share of data center as a percentage of national electricity use in Europe is fairly limited, but it's going to increase over the years as we go to 2030. In 2030, on average, it reached to 4% of the total European market. But in some markets, such as Ireland, that would be much higher, nearly 20% of the electricity is used. So data centers are growing in Europe, slightly behind US still. But how batteries can support data centers, we are seeing that what we hear and see also in US is that battery systems are the fastest option for building out flexible capacity if you need to procure something fast. There are supply chain constraints, there is grid bottlenecks. That all means that you need batteries basically on these sites to basically compensate for that, right? So how and where battery will be used, I think is still a question. So battery could be used to basically cover the flexibility need, because we know data centers basically have a peak demands, and then there's a lot of question of the cost of that, if the grid is enough to support that, etc. There is also how is the battery going to be, like if they're going to support you to build the grid connection that you need faster. In US, we're also hearing about even the off-grid solutions for data centers, because it's just for them waiting so long in the grid connection queue does not make sense. It could be also that the congestion is becoming an issue. So you can put data center in a certain area that basically there is no grid congestion, and then support to have the battery also there as a support. So I would say it's clear that with the demand that is coming to the market on the scale that is coming, you need flexible resources to support that. But how able, we still need time to figure it out. In US, I know it's not, I cannot tell you even in the US that is a bit more advanced than US, Europe in that sense. They already know exactly how they are using the battery. There are several basically different type of services that battery can provide to the data center. But in Europe, it's coming also. I would say, yeah, it's just in a couple of years, we will see more and more of this project taking shape.
Yeah, and I think what's striking is when you set out all the different potential use cases for large-scale energy storage in terms of data centers. Like, it's really a very diverse mix, right? So it can be on the grid, supporting the grid. It can be behind the meter, reducing the need for the peak electricity connection to the network. So it really is diverse, and I think that's perhaps where energy storages and batteries' great value lies. And you said quick to deploy, because we are hearing that some of the lead times for gas turbines are really extremely long, and their cost very high. So if batteries can be quick and they are available, that's another major plus.
Yes, exactly. This is one of the things, for example, we heard quite often also in the US that they start deploying batteries because the supply chain constraint and getting like the supply for the new gas turbine was so long that for them was much more faster to basically use a battery to get to cover their basically demand and load need. So that has been one of the driving factors. And then afterward, as I said, like how you want to use the battery is also quite different project to project. We also even see some project in the US that they say like, okay, we're going to put this battery because we can also use it for balancing the renewables, right? You have this large battery that supports you during the time that you have a peak basically peak consumption, but at the same time, you can use the same battery to basically absorb the extra renewable generation during the times with the oversupply. But it's quite a bit to figure out. But I think from the early days, we saw that when the topic of data centers come to the picture and the demand has started growing instead of going down after a while, we saw that the battery was basically also a topic there. So there was always data center and batteries co-located with them. And I think we'll see more and more of this project. But it takes time to understand and I think figure out what are the best services that battery can provide next to the data centers, even though it could be, I would say, different market to market and location to location. but probably we'll hear more about them.
Will be fascinating to see how it evolves. Now, in these settings, these batteries are being developed largely without subsidy or with kind of economic drivers and the driver of speed to deploy as well. But of course, policy is going to play a key role, and there has been a series of tenders here in Europe which have been driving deployment. What is the outlook for tenders in Europe going forward?
So in Europe, actually, it's very interesting, very good to know that by the end of 2025, we have around 18 gigawatt of utility scale battery deployed in Europe. So 18 gigawatt. In our database, we have at the moment nearly 27 gigawatt of derated battery capacity awarded in different auctions. So more than the capacity that have been deployed over the past, let's say from 2015, where the utility scale market of Europe has started taking off to now, which is nearly 10 years. More than that has been awarded over the past 5 years only in different capacity market, auctions and tenders. A lot of them have been from the capacity markets, from nearly 60% of that. And that is something worth highlighting because I said 26 derated capacity. So as you know, in the capacity market auctions in Europe, they basically derate the capacities, meaning that certain percentage of the battery capacity of each project is eligible to apply for the capacity market auctions, right? So if we look at the whole basically generation capacity, so if you look at the full generation of this project, the total awarded project that's going to come online is far, far larger. So that's very interesting to know. And we are seeing more and more tender coming to Europe. So especially in some market, we see the tenders are something planned, like capacity market auction that has been happening in the UK or in Belgium. They are on an annual basis. You know when they will be announced, what's probably the next auction going to look like. There are some others tenders and auction that's happening in Europe. They are more one-off, or it's going to be more than one time, but you don't know how the next one going to look like. But we are seeing that the European governments are taking actions because they know the market needs a storage. And at the moment, in most of the European market, I would say merchant revenue is not enough or is not enough risk-free to encourage developers to commit themselves to project. So I think that's why we see many of the government announcing this tender and auction to kickstart the market. And then afterward, I think hoping that the market goes and rolls on its own, and the revenue landscape for batteries is also getting better and it's going to support that as well. So in Europe, actually, it's very interesting, very good to know that by the end of 2025, we have around 18 gigawatt of utility scale battery deployed in Europe. So 18 gigawatt. In our database, we have at the moment nearly 27 gigawatt of derated battery capacity awarded in different auctions. So more than the capacity that have been deployed over the past, let's say from 2015, where the utility scale market of Europe has started taking off to now, which is nearly 10 years. More than that has been awarded over the past 5 years only in different capacity market, auctions and tenders. A lot of them have been from the capacity markets, from nearly 60% of that. And that is something worth highlighting because I said 26 derated capacity. So as you know, in the capacity market auctions in Europe, they basically derate the capacities, meaning that certain percentage of the battery capacity of each project is eligible to apply for the capacity market auctions, right? So if we look at the whole basically generation capacity, so if you look at the full generation of this project, the total awarded project that's going to come online is far, far larger. So that's very interesting to know. And we are seeing more and more tender coming to Europe. So especially in some market, we see the tenders are something planned, like capacity market auction that has been happening in the UK or in Belgium. They are on an annual basis. You know when they will be announced, what's probably the next auction going to look like. There are some others tenders and auction that's happening in Europe. They are more one-off, or it's going to be more than one time, but you don't know how the next one going to look like. But we are seeing that the European governments are taking actions because they know the market needs a storage. And at the moment, in most of the European market, I would say merchant revenue is not enough or is not enough risk-free to encourage developers to commit themselves to project. So I think that's why we see many of the government announcing this tender and auction to kickstart the market. And then afterward, I think hoping that the market goes and rolls on its own, and the revenue landscape for batteries is also getting better and it's going to support that as well. So the outlook is good.
We saw something similar with renewables, right? That the key word being risk-free. And then once you're able to demonstrate these business models, demonstrate the revenue stream, banks and investors become familiar enough or comfortable enough with the risk profile, and tenders is one way that we can get there.
Yes, exactly. So I think it would be the same probably with battery, and I think market also will find its way of making this project basically more risk-free with a market-based contract and options rather than waiting for the governmental-led tenders. So, for example, you mentioned renewables. Renewables, we know in several markets are now being deployed through the route to the market for them is PPA contracts. So they are basically seeing investment in renewable in the PPA. For storage, is interesting that we saw in US already a lot of projects were coming online in California or in ERCOT with tolling contract. In Europe, we are hearing now about tolling contract, but it's been 2 years, and the number of contracts actually so far still limited. In compare with US, it's going fast, but it's not so many yet signed still in Europe, even though we hear so much about it. So I think the market is just getting used to the idea of batteries and understanding of, okay, how these assets going to play a role in this market, and then with that they find its own route to the market as well. But I think initially many markets, especially for example what we have seen in the Eastern European markets, governmental-led auction and tender were very, very important to kickstart the market, bring the attention of developers, and just basically sending the signal that there is a need for flexibility. So we are recognizing that and we are taking action. I think that has been quite a push.
And by tolling markets, you mean this is when a battery developer will develop a project and then contract with a third party. They kind of lease the battery to play with it on the market. So it minimizes the risk for the investor, but then there's a potential upside for the operator of the asset.
Yes, exactly. So that's one type. So at the moment, we see that battery projects are being contracted in different types. So tolling is one type, but tolling also has different types. So I would say like in tolling, I will split between physical tolling and virtual tolling. What we saw in Europe so far has been more physical tolling. So physical tolling is basically simply renting out a battery, right? Close to what you said. So you basically build a battery as a battery owner and you rent it out to somebody else. You get the money, and the money could depend on your contract term, the duration, the price, etc. So that's a physical tolling. So it's very easy as renting out a battery. The other one is virtual tolling, what we see far more in US. So in US at the moment, actually everything is virtual tolling. And I have started hearing about virtual tolling also now in Europe, especially in Germany. We saw some coming online, and virtual tolling basically means that as a battery owner, you operate your own battery. So the battery operation is in your hand or your contracted optimization company. And then the off-taker that you sign a contract with, they just want to benefit from having this battery. So there are different type of a contract type that we are seeing that could be categorized in the virtual tolling, but the most common one I would say is the top-bottom settlements. So basically, you hedge against the market price volatility by saying that, okay, we give you this amount per day for the top-bottom 4 hour, for example, differences, and we get the actual of the market. So basically, you bet on a price that's going to be the volatility of the market, and then you get the actual one. This is kind of hedging against the power market price volatility. And it helps, for example, for the off-taker that they have also a lot of share of renewables in their assets. So this is also motivation then for the battery owner to perform very well in the market, etc. On the PPA side, we are also seeing quite a bit of a movement recently. So initially, the hybrid PPA started taking off in Europe, but a lot slower than tolling. But now I would say the landscape has shifted quite a bit, because as we talked about it, many of the renewable projects, like solar project in Spain, they were coming online and being financed through long-term PPA contract. And that has been pretty difficult at the moment in this market, with more and more energy produced by solar plants being curtailed or being hit by negative prices. So that has been an issue. We know that that has been a topic in most of the contracts that are being signed. Now we are seeing that developers are trying to come up with an innovative structure, like deemed generation PPA contract. But these are not very easy, very complex negotiation. So we are seeing more and more shift to having solar plus a storage PPA contracts. So it's not that it doesn't need that it necessarily should be a co-located asset or hybrid PPA contract. You can sign a portfolio contract, so one with solar, one with the storage, but the combination of that hedge against the market price volatility again. So if the power price is negative, obviously the solar owner doesn't want to take that risk. The off-taker also doesn't want to take that risk. And then the battery contract is here to support this negotiation. So hybrid PPA and solar plus the storage, let's say, contracting is becoming more and more common. And we actually, even some market we hear it's quite impossible by now to sign a PPA contract for solar without battery on site. But I think it takes time until we see really that as a most recognized route to the market. But I think this is where we are heading.
Yeah, it will be fascinating to see these business models evolve. And what I was struck with in your most recent report was that co-location still is not the majority of deployments, and actually far from it, of large-scale energy storage in Europe. At the moment, standalone BESS is really the most common form of energy storage. Is that right? And why is that the case?
Yes, exactly. So in Europe so far, I think by the end of 2025, about 15% of the total installed capacity of this 18 gigawatt that I talked about are co-located. The rest is a standalone. And I think it's because of the business cases that was available in Europe and is still available in Europe. So in European utility scale market, it started taking off back in 2015. And that was pretty much because of the revenue that battery could have made from the ancillary market. We saw quite a bit of an investment in utility scale storage back then in two markets, UK and Germany. And all of these projects, both of these markets were offering very good revenue for batteries when they were participating in ancillary market. But things shift and things change. Back in around 2020, we saw the German ancillary market saturating. Some said that batteries were victim of their own success. The prices dropped massively. And then we saw actually quite a bit of a slowdown in the German market. So we didn't see so much of an investment anymore in the utility scale battery projects in Germany. In UK, the market kept rolling because of the UK government introducing more and more ancillary services or new services that battery could provide. So these basically revenue stream and business cases were all good for a standalone system. And that's why we saw more standalone system coming online. And then now afterward, we are seeing now more project coming online across European market. We talked about 26 gigawatt of battery, the rated battery capacity being awarded across several tenders, but around 80% of that awarded capacities are in an auction that support a standalone system. Like capacity market auctions or standalone storage auctions, what we saw in Greece, they are promoting a standalone systems, or they are supporting, let's say, a standalone system business cases. The hybrid asset participation in tenders, we have some co-located tenders like in Spain or Portugal, but then these are far more limited in number than the other one. But things, I think it was changing because we are seeing that the grid is getting more scarce, and then the government are also recognizing the important role of co-location. So we're gonna see, I think, a bit of a shift in the subsidies becoming available. Like Spain now particularly called out that in the new capacity market auction that will be released with coming soon, if they want to award solar versus storage projects in the capacity market auction. So that's something different from the capacity market auction that's currently going on. And also we are seeing, for example, in Greece, the government said they're going to give the priority connection for solar versus storage projects. So that has been a quite motivation for solar developers to install a battery, because everybody want to cut the grid connection queue and nobody want to wait 5 to 10 years in the connection. So we have seen the push on the market side for more co-location, and I think business cases are also taking shape. So as we talked, like negative prices are getting more. So solar and wind developers are also now looking into a storage as basically an asset that then can support their investments or improve their investment, let's say.
Yeah, and it could very, very well be the case that in the future, a large-scale solar project really can't go ahead without energy storage, or even very soon, because of these kind of low capture rates, this cannibalization, this negative prices during the middle of the day. Like, you're going to just have to curtail so much of the generation when solar generates that adding a battery becomes a necessity.
Yes, exactly. So I think it's, as we said, like the market fundamentally doesn't go anywhere. You need batteries to basically support your intermittent power production. So batteries definitely have the role to play. And I think on the investment side, we're gonna see more and more co-location making sense in Europe, as basically the revenue streams for battery change. In US, why we saw more co-located asset coming online in compared with Europe was that because for a while they had this tax reduction for co-located asset, not a standalone storage system. So the market has started taking shape with solar versus storage coming online. Everybody has started doing that because who doesn't want to benefit from tax reduction, right? At some point during Biden administration, they changed the rule. They said like now a standalone system are also eligible to apply for that. But we still saw, we saw the standalone projects, the number increase year on year in US, but it didn't mean that solar versus storage was going down. We saw still solar developers, they were all recognizing the role of a storage. They saw that what's happening with volatility, with more solar capacity being built. So we saw that the co-location basically market stayed strong there. So I would say, in Europe, we're going to see similar trend. We will see more co-located assets. It's just that by when and how fast, because it's still in Europe, there is need for revising some of the regulations that are in place.
And you were talking about ancillary services markets just a moment ago, the UK being such a prime example, and they did extend the different types of frequency regulation markets that batteries could play in or bid into. So there was a bit of a longer tail to that market, but it's often described as being a very shallow market, that it can be very quickly exhausted by energy storage projects. Is that what you expect to see throughout Europe as these kind of markets, frequency regulation, generally bundled together as ancillary services markets, become deregulated and available for energy storage to kind of play in?
Yes, definitely. So I have a slide on UK battery revenue stack that we can look at here. And as you can see in UK, the revenue basically has changed. The revenue landscape for battery has changed quite massively. So battery were earning very good money from ancillary market services. As you can see in 2022, like nearly 80% of the revenue were battery making from the market were coming from ancillary market, dynamic containment, basically services. But then as we all talk and as we all hear, ancillary market is a shallow market. Its capacity is not going to expand as fast as the capacity we see for wind and solar. So there are some changes in the ancillary market and some forecasts that we make, and we see that, for example, the AFR capacity increasing quite a bit through the year in some markets such as Germany, but there is a limitation of how much this capacity is going to increase, and ancillary market remaining shallow means that eventually they will saturate. So what we see is that in long term, most markets behave like UK as more batteries are currently being built in the system. So eventually, it's just a matter of time. The share of revenue that battery can make from ancillary market will decline. In our forecast, what we see is that they normally in long term, after the saturation of the market, the revenue batteries can make from ancillaries 10 to 20%, means that the rest is coming from energy trading and mainly arbitrage revenue that they can gain from basically from the market, so from power price volatility. So power price volatility is the most important factors on the revenue streams of battery. Of course, the government can support that, bring the risk down by giving the contracted revenue for these assets, but otherwise, the most of the future revenue of the assets across the markets gonna stay dependent on the arbitrage and volatility.
Well, so it seems that these ancillary services markets are kind of a first mover, an early stage market as batteries enter the marketplace. But as you said earlier, that price volatility isn't going anywhere. So there will still be opportunities over the long term for batteries. Now, turning to technology, we've seen that the EV, the automotive sector, right? This is an enormous industry. It dwarfs the little renewable energy industry that we're a part of. And of course, they're driving demand for lithium ion batteries. That means there's a lot of momentum behind the technology. How are you seeing that play out in terms of deployment in Europe? Are there still opportunities for other battery chemistries? I'm thinking kind of, flow batteries. We've been told for a long time that they're very well suited for longer duration storage. How's it playing out?
So we see, about long duration storage technologies, we can see as the duration gets longer, there could be some cost competitiveness associated with these long duration technologies, including flow battery that you mentioned. But still at the moment, as you said, lithium ion was a lucky technology that was not applied only in one sector, it was two sectors. And then what drove the prices of lithium ion battery was actually EV sector, right? So the mass production of battery for the EV was what brought the prices of lithium ion down. But the other technologies like flow batteries or other one, at the moment, they don't have the disadvantage, right? So in reality, is still the cost of most other assets that are competing, long duration storage technologies that are competing with lithium ion is much higher than lithium ion assets. So I think there is a role for long duration storage projects have to play in the market, but it still would, I would say, would take time, because these long duration assets like flow batteries, in order to make a profitable business case, they basically have to compete with lithium ion, and I think that has been tough. So for them, route to the market have been long duration to auction and tenders or signals that they are receiving from several markets, such as UK or Italy, as it's been the case. But even in those ones, in those tenders, we are seeing that lithium ion actually being the dominant technology. It was actually for me very surprising to see the share of project being awarded, being nominated in the UK eldest tender, and then 70% was lithium ion. Because at the end, at the moment, lithium ion of 6 to 8 hours, let's say, they are still cheaper than some other technologies that you're mentioning here. And if they want to get financing, they can compete with lower prices. But as we go forward, probably change because the market dynamic change. We need storage technologies that are more suitable for longer duration than like 6 to 8 hours. And I think that's when the role of other assets, including flow batteries, come to the picture, because at longer duration, they have basically a chance to compete. But in near term in Europe, our outlook is still limited for this long duration asset because of the price difference that we see. If you want to bring an asset online to meet the market demand and need at the moment, lithium still is far more competitive and can get the job done for you at a lower price. But this will shift as the market landscape, the power market landscape changes.
Yeah, it's the power of just scale, right? The more we make of something, the cheaper it gets, and there's huge scale between lithium ion. But as we get to kind of multi-day storage, perhaps there's more opportunities for other technologies. Now, looking to your forecast, let's dig into that a little bit. Now, the headline figure is utility scale BESS is set to grow 7-fold by 2034. So that's to around 130 gigawatts or 430 gigawatt hours. Talk me through the different geographies. How do you expect that to play out here in Europe?
As we see the energy storage project pipeline seeing major growth across Europe, as you can see it also in this picture. As you can see in this picture on the left-hand side, you see the bubble chart that shows the utility scale operational storage project. So initially the project scale was smaller, and then the bubbles that you can spot, most of them are blue. Those are the UK project that you see that they are taking shape, and the scale, the bubbles are getting bigger and more frequent. So in UK we saw quite a bit of investment back then. And I remember 2 years ago, actually, I was at the Smarter conference. I said that a more diversified Europe is emerging. So I showed a slide that we said that UK has 50% of the utility scale installation. That share has dropped quite a bit. At the moment now, they are at around 30%, as quite a bit of an investment has been done also in Germany and Italy at the moment. So we saw what we said 2 years ago, that a more diversified Europe is emerging. That's been proven to be true. Sorry. And it's also very clear in this bubble chart. If you look at 25, 26, you see a lot of yellow bubbles coming up, right? That's Eastern European market that they started bringing a lot of storage projects online. We see the green one coming online, and then you see most of them are at 4 hours. It's not anymore like UK or the German pink and blue bubbles that are at 2 hours. Is because of they are sitting normally next to solar plants. It makes sense then to do 4 hours instead of 2 hours. So the European market is getting more diversified. So on the right-hand side, you see the breakdown of project pipeline by region. So you should know that we have around 120 gigawatt of energy storage projects in our database. Only 14% of that is online. Majority of those project pipeline are still in Northern European market, especially UK. But I think this, in terms of how much of those capacity going to come online, and as we go forward, we will see that shifting as we go forward. So we're going to see basically more investments and more projects taking shape and becoming also evident in our pipeline in Eastern Europe markets and also Southern Europe, Iberia. And I think by 2034, which is end of our outlook, we're going to see quite a fair split of the capacity being installed across all the regions. So each of them, the share will basically balance itself out. The market fundamental stays there. So there is limitation of how much battery you want to put in the market. So you have X gigawatt of wind and solar in the market. That also means you need X% of that battery in the market. And eventually that will become the case across all the regions.
Well, a diverse market kind of and geographical outlook is a good one for suppliers, because that means that we might avoid the booms and busts that have so often been a feature of renewable energy deployment, particularly in its early stages. Anna Darmani is a principal analyst with the energy storage team at Wood Mackenzie. Thank you so much for sharing your insights, some of these charts as well, and for joining the Smarter podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for the chat. Really enjoyed it.